screeching engines and flashing lights masked a nightmare on the streets of Kedah. A gang of machete-wielding motorcyclists shattered the quiet night with a coordinated two-pronged ambush that left a young car washer dead and a security guard seriously injured. Weekend commuters, unaccustomed to violence, suddenly found themselves face to face with chaos. In a blur of steel and speed, lives were changed forever. What lay behind this calculated attack? Which group orchestrated the bloodshed? Tonight, we examine the events that turned Kedah into a battleground and the gang violence that continues to haunt its streets. A coordinated assault. Just past midnight on August 15, 2024, in the ordinarily quiet town of Kung To in Pawang Bedong, a brutal incident unfolded that would soon capture national attention. First, a security guard was attacked while on duty, ambushed by a biker and 5 accomplices, armed with machetes. 10 minutes later, the same group struck again, this time targeting a young man working at a nearby car wash. He succumbed to his injuries before reaching the hospital. These were not random acts of violence. The timing, execution, and force of the attacks pointed to deliberate planning. Witnesses reported seeing a group of motorcycles speeding away, their riders dressed in black, blades gleaming under streetlights. The attackers moved with confidence and coordination, suggesting training, structure, and a specific motive. A message of violence police immediately sealed off the surrounding area. This was no ordinary murder investigation. It was treated as a targeted execution designed to send a message, and it was heard across the country. Within 24 hours, law enforcement had traced suspects to Sungai Petani and Alor Sitar. A combination of intelligence gathering, CCTV footage, digital tracking, and informant networks led to the arrest of 8 individuals, aged 19 to 40. 6 were charged with murder under Section 302 of the Penal Code. 2 others were charged with causing grievous hurt under Section 326. Investigators strengthened their case by appealing to the public for witness testimony and additional footage, an effort that was met with swift cooperation. The police concluded that this was not a street dispute. It was a mission, and they treated it accordingly. Motive and method. One pressing question remained. Why? Were these rogue bikers acting out personal vendettas, or was there a deeper network at play? Investigators soon turned their attention to possible gang affiliations. The method of attack, swift ambushes using bladed weapons, closely mirrored tactics used by outlaw motorcycle gangs across Southeast Asia. These gangs often avoid firearms to reduce immediate police response and instead rely on knives and machetes. While authorities stopped short of naming a specific gang, the signs pointed to the involvement of a rising criminal group that viewed motorcycles as their symbol of power and violence as their language. If proven, the Kedah ambush would rank among the deadliest gang-related assaults in the region's recent memory and force a reassessment of how law enforcement tackles organized biker crime. The real victims. What made the Kedah attacks particularly disturbing was not just the violence, but the victims themselves. Neither the security guard nor the car washer had criminal records, gang affiliations, or histories of violence. They were attacked simply because they were there. This randomness deepened public fear, suggesting that anyone could become a victim. Authorities speculated that the attack may have been a gang initiation ritual or a public display of dominance intended to instill fear. In this dark game, innocent people became pawns. Building the case. The investigation was methodical. Every second of the attack was reconstructed from eyewitness accounts, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and phone records. The machetes used in the attacks were recovered and sent for DNA testing. Blood-stained clothing was found and preserved as evidence. But proving who committed the act was only part of the challenge. Investigators also aimed to identify leadership within the group and prove intent. Prosecutors pushed for the maximum penalties under the law, including life imprisonment or capital punishment under Section 302. If gang connections were proven, sentence enhancements under anti-gang legislation could also apply. Meanwhile, defense attorneys began to argue cases of mistaken identity and lack of intent, but the volume of evidence, including digital traces and multiple witnesses, gave the prosecution confidence. This case, they believed, could serve as a warning to other outlaw biker gangs operating across Malaysia. A measured response law enforcement acted swiftly, not just to capture the attackers, but to reassert control. Mobile checkpoints were set up across key exits around town, anticipating escape attempts. Patrols increased near schools, gas stations, and intersections that had become crime scenes overnight. Intelligence officers worked in parallel, tracking phones linked to known affiliates and building a network of connections across state lines. Police didn't work in isolation. Community leaders were brought in to help restore calm and promote vigilance. Crime scene investigators searched for clues, tire marks, blade fragments, scraps of clothing, anything that could strengthen the case. This was not reactive policing. It was a coordinated strategy to disrupt an emerging gang network before it could take root. Kedah had become a test, and failure was not an option. Public outcry and unity. When the news broke, it sparked national outrage. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #Justice for Badong and #Stop Biker Violence began trending within hours. A candlelight vigil held for the murdered car washer drew hundreds. Donations for his family poured in. But grief quickly turned to determination. People began organizing safety watch groups. Strangers shared self-defense tips. Neighbors formed local chat groups. In the face of fear, communities unified. Religious leaders from various backgrounds condemned the violence and called for peace and solidarity. Residents locked their doors earlier. Parents started escorting their children home from school. The Kedah attacks revealed more than just a violent crime. They exposed a brewing conflict between a rising gang culture and the communities trying to resist it. Motorcycles, machetes, and bloodshed painted a terrifying picture, but also sparked a forceful response. Law enforcement stepped up. Citizens banded together, and the message was sent. Violence would not go unanswered, but the threat remains. Until justice is fully served and the root causes addressed, Kedah and towns like it must remain vigilant. The bikers had intended to spread fear. Instead, they ignited a sense of unity. In many parts of Southeast Asia, firearms are a rarity. Machetes, on the other hand, are cheap, silent, and effective. They don't offer warnings like gunfire. They leave no echo. That's precisely why gangs use them. Not out of mercy, but out of calculated efficiency. However, what happened in Kedah wasn't just practical, it was theatrical. The attackers wanted to terrorize, to leave a lasting impression on the community. Carrying blades was not just about committing violence, it was a statement. Young onlookers, both in the streets and online, were watching. Short videos on TikTok, WhatsApp statuses, and grainy clips of gang attacks circulate quickly. So too does the myth of power associated with wielding a blade. Experts warn that this growing blade culture is less about the weapons themselves and more about what they represent. Until communities and governments offer young people alternate paths to dignity and recognition, the machete will remain a twisted rite of passage. Once exaggerated in Hollywood, biker gangs are now deeply embedded in the real backroads of Malaysia. What started as scrappy motorcycle crews has evolved into organized crime groups with clear hierarchies and criminal intent. The appeal? Brotherhood, power, and fast, untaxed income. Some gangs run illegal drag races, others traffic drugs or extort local businesses for protection. The incident in Kedah didn't come out of nowhere. It reflects a broader change in the criminal landscape. Intelligence reports indicate a rise in biker chapters across Kedah and Penang. These are not casual riders. They communicate using coded language, follow strict ranks, and operate with alarming coordination. These are not just gangs. They're organized crime syndicates in motion. If unchecked, they will carve out territories much like the mafias of the past, with blood. While gang violence made the headlines, mental illness is the quieter, often overlooked element. Earlier this year, 4 police officers were attacked by a man later diagnosed with untreated schizophrenia. It wasn't an isolated case. Authorities in Kedah are still investigating whether any of the attackers suffered from psychiatric conditions. Even if they didn't, the growing trend is alarming. Joblessness and drug addiction are rising, and mental health breakdowns are becoming more frequent and more violent. Unfortunately, most police are not trained to differentiate between mental illness and calculated crime. Mental health services, especially in rural areas, remain severely underfunded. If Malaysia hopes to prevent future tragedies, it must stop treating mental illness as an afterthought. The consequences were immediate. After the attacks, local life changed. Shops began closing early, car washes saw fewer evening customers, parents kept their children indoors after dark. The familiar hum of motorcycles now causes anxiety. Security guards asked for reinforcements, and shop owners upgraded their lighting systems. Insurance companies quietly adjusted rates in Badong. The fear wasn't just about what happened, it was about where it might happen next. This wasn't just a crime, it was a rupture. Everyone felt it. In the KAW investigation, CCTV footage played a critical role. Cameras from petrol stations, convenience stores, and gated communities helped piece together a timeline. One video showing masked bikers refueling just before the first strike became a major lead. Police matched movements with phone data. Forensic teams enhanced low-quality footage. It wasn't enough to identify every suspect, but it helped eliminate dead ends and guide the investigation forward. The case reignited a long-standing debate across Malaysian towns. Surveillance isn't just about theft prevention anymore. When authorities can't be everywhere, communities step up. After the KA attacks, WhatsApp groups began sharing alerts. Mosques issued safety reminders. Businesses stayed open, only with armed security. Parents began organizing informal patrols. Schools distributed safety pamphlets. Non-governmental organizations joined the effort. Even parent-teacher associations partnered with police to educate students on the dangers. It wasn't just reaction, it was a collective response. Citizens realized they could no longer remain passive. They had to reclaim their streets, block by block. The Machete attacks prompted swift legal action. 6 suspects now face murder charges under Section 302, which carries the death penalty. 2 more face charges of grievous harm under Section 326. Still, legal experts say this is not enough. Many are pushing for legislation that formally designates armed biker gangs as organized crime syndicates. This change would allow authorities broader surveillance powers, enable preemptive raids, and bring tougher penalties. Parliament is reportedly working on draft laws. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a legal wake-up call. Within the biker community, the incident caused division. While some remained silent, others spoke out. Legitimate motorcycle clubs issued statements condemning the violence. They organized memorial rides for victims and met with police to publicly distance themselves from outlaw groups. Some clubs even tightened internal rules. No weapons, no tolerance, no exceptions. Still, many riders felt unfairly judged and profiled. Nonetheless, most understood the urgency. Silence was no longer an option. One theory makes the case even darker: turf warfare. Police believe the attack bore all the hallmarks of a message: a fast, brutal, public display. Kedah's location near smuggling routes makes it a valuable piece of territory. Intelligence suggests rival gangs have been scouting the area for over a year. This ambush may have been a line drawn in blood. Authorities are now tracking every biker meetup, license plate, and nighttime convoy. If this is a turf war, then the violence may have only just begun. What began as a local tragedy quickly dominated national headlines. News anchors dissected every detail. Lawmakers took notice. The Prime Minister requested updates. Talk shows debated gang culture, mental illness, and rural law enforcement gaps. The attention brought hope to some. Maybe Kedah will finally receive long-term investments in safety, more officers, better surveillance, and youth outreach. For others, it was a stark reminder that these are not isolated incidents, they are warnings, and Malaysia can no longer afford to ignore them. Zoom out, and the Kedah attack fits into a disturbing regional trend. Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines have all experienced biker-related machete violence in recent years. The weapons may differ, but the tactics are similar. Experts suspect cross-border influence, smuggled blades, shared strategies, and recruitment through forums and encrypted messaging apps. ASEAN crime units have taken notice. Malaysian police are now sharing intelligence with their regional counterparts. Because if this is indeed a regional problem, and all signs say it is, then tackling it will require more than local patrols. It demands coordinated regional efforts. The authorities are now adopting a multi-layered prevention strategy. This includes tighter regulations on large blade possession, more controls on motorcycle convoys, and public warnings about suspicious biker activity. Police are considering setting up regular checkpoints in high-risk zones. On the social front, NGOs are leading youth outreach initiatives to steer at-risk teens away from gang culture. Schools are holding seminars on peer pressure, gang loyalty, and online radicalization. Mental health agencies are stepping in to identify individuals on the brink of breakdown. Some cities are even exploring machete buyback programs or requiring ID registration for large blade purchases. The road ahead may be long, but it might be the one that finally puts an end to the chaos.